last 30 plus years. And it's been the thing that's captivated my interest more than anything. How meditation can make such a huge difference when there is, with so little input from a person. It doesn't take years of study. It doesn't require you to actually have to learn things by rote. It just means that you need to keep an open heart. And I think it's been a journey where I've been exploring how much I can open my heart and what a difference it makes to my life, and then hopefully to other people. I was exposed to meditation as a child, but I was one of those children that couldn't sit still at all. And so yeah, I've always been a meditator that likes to move. I'm an active meditator. And fortunately, within the Brahma Kumaris, within the practice of Raj Yoga, there is ample space for that. Not just sitting, but moving and active meditation. Today's talk, I'm going to share with you some different ideas, lots of ideas that have been important to me when it comes to a positive narrative. And then I'll open it up to you and we will explore it further together. So what are we going to talk about? Positive narrative, why it's so important. If you see my eyes going that way, I must apologize. Normally you would find me in Covent Garden in the basement, where we don't see any light and we don't see any trees. And right now I'm like everybody else in lockdown, and I have this amazing view of the garden and trees and a beautiful blue sky. So if my eye keeps going that way, it's because that's quite a beautiful thing to be looking at as I share with you. I hope that's okay. So yes, why a positive narrative can make such a huge difference in our life. Perhaps why thinking like a mum is so important to a positive narrative. What is stubborn optimism? And what is the biggest thing, the smallest thing you could do, which will have the biggest impact on creating a positive narrative on a daily basis? And then finally, how that it also affects your memory and how it edits our memory, and it allows us to access parts of our memory where, instead of the memory dictating emotional responses in our life, the memory is something we can then edit and change. And we're going to be looking at that. So those are just a few of the things that I want to touch on with you this evening, and I hope you enjoy it. And we can explore it further in questions, as we said. So let me start with a story. It's the story of a rabbi who would go into a forest for his own self, to take time out, and a monastery and the monks living in the monastery. For those of you who know this story, please bear with me, but it's one that I find very, very useful to understand what a positive narrative does in our lives. So there's a monastery in a forest, and it's a very old monastery, very beautiful, and it's in the forest because it's secluded. It's a place where people can just really reserve their energy and discover the truth of who they are, their relationship with the universe, I guess, with nature, and even with God. That's what a monastery is about. And this monastery is very interesting because everybody in the monastery is above 70. The youngest person in the monastery, the youngest brother, is 70. And the abbot is close to 95, kind of thing. So he's a well-established, well-lived, well-experienced abbot. And there's a gardener, Brother John, who is the gardener. There's a cook who does the cooking. There's somebody who does all the maintenance work. So, you know, otherwise how would it function? So, but the problem is nobody is going to the monastery anymore. They're not getting people to visit. They're not getting people who want to explore spirituality any longer. And so it's a dying monastery. And they themselves call it a dying monastery because there's so few of them left and nobody coming in. So anyway, once a year, the rabbi goes to his cottage and has a little retreat for himself in his cottage. And once a year, the abbot goes to visit the rabbi and they have tea and they chat. So the abbot goes to visit the rabbi when he comes to stay at his cottage for his retreat. And what happens is that conversation goes and the rabbi says to the abbot, how's it all going? How are all the brothers? Excuse me. And the rabbi, the abbot says, well, you know, we're a dying breed. We're getting old. The place is falling apart because the brother who takes care of the maintenance is getting old and he can't climb the roof so easily. The person who does the garden and grows the vegetables getting old and can't dig deeply or stay in the garden so long. Etc., etc. So the food is very simple because we don't have a variety of things to eat, and it's tiring for the person who cooks, etc., etc. So and nobody's coming to the monastery anymore. Nobody wants spirituality. And the abbot said, how's it going at the synagogue? And the answer was from the rabbi, well, we have the same problem. Nobody wants to come to the synagogue. And so they're talking to each other and commiserating and saying, yes, it's like this. You know, the conversation. And then the rabbi pauses and says, you know, but I did hear something, but it can't be. It can't possibly be. And the abbot said, no, tell me, anything, tell me. Maybe it's useful. And so the rabbi said, well, I'm pretty sure it's not about you. Excuse me. It's not about you, but there's a rumor going around that one amongst the monks in the monastery is the Messiah. And the abbot looks and he says, no, that can't be true. None of us could be the Messiah. And so they both decide it's not true. So they have a lovely tea and the abbot goes back to the monastery and the monks ask the abbot, well, what did you talk about? What happened? And the abbot said, oh, the rabbi's having the same problems as us. Nobody wants spirituality any longer. Nobody wants to know God. Nobody wants to discover their own truth. Nobody wants to explore the bigger picture. And but they did hear a rumor, but it's not true. It really isn't true. And they said, no, what's the rumor? And the abbot told the monks, the brothers, the rumor is that one amongst us is the rabbi. Not the rabbi, sorry, the Messiah. And the monks all turned round, all the brothers said, no, that can't be. We can't be the Messiah. So anyway, seed is sown, a thought has been planted. And after a few days, they started wondering amongst themselves, in their own minds, well, what if one of us is the Messiah? Who would it be? So the first thought naturally was, it must be the abbot, because he is so old, so experienced, so wise. He always has something deep and meaningful to share. And then they started thinking, well, maybe it's Brother John who does the cooking. the gardening. He's always able to grow things, even in this hard, stony land. He's able to grow vegetables. That's pretty amazing. Maybe it's now a few days later, so they started thinking, well, maybe it's Brother Peter. He always appears, doesn't say a word, but he always appears when a light bulb needs fixing, or there's a leak coming and he'll plug it up, or if the sink isn't working, or if the toilet is blocked. You don't need to say anything. He just appears, deals with it, and vanishes. He doesn't disturb anybody. So maybe it's Brother Peter. Then they thought, well, maybe it's Brother James. He's in the kitchen and he always manages to cook up very tasty, very simple, but very tasty meals. And they fill you up, they make you feel nurtured. So maybe it's Brother James. Do you see the story? How it's going? And then the question was, then they started thinking, but what if it's me? What if I am the Messiah? And just this narrative, just this storytelling, just this curiosity, just this openness, and these are all the things that come up with a narrative, a positive narrative, got them starting to change the vision they held for themselves. So they started interacting in a different manner. Because if Brother James or Brother John or Brother Peter or the abbot or one of the other brothers was the Messiah, so they showed each other respect. They showed a kindness to each other, a sweetness in their language. Whatever they were doing, they began to value, because I could be the Messiah. And so the value of what I'm doing is making the biggest difference. And just this thinking, this narrative, meant that when the summer came and people started coming for camping or picnics in the forest or walks in the forest, they'd see these monks and the way they interacted and the smiles that they had, and people started going in and asking questions, and people were inspired by the monks just from the narrative of the thinking, the positive narrative. And then young men started coming and saying, well, if this is the quality of your life and there's no stress and there's no anxiety, and it's not an easy life, obviously, but it's one that obviously is fulfilling. It gives happiness. It gives a sense of meaning. I'd like that in my life. And so then young men started wanting to study and become monks. And so it became a thriving community. It wasn't something that someone else was telling them to do. It was a narrative that they started to explore on their own as individuals. And that's what a positive narrative does. It opens the door. It inspires. It energizes the person who's having the positive narrative, but equally it energizes people who are in your company. It changes something that's boring and routine into something very, very special, because you are doing it. It means that we start using energy that is creative for ourselves, but equally what it does is create energy in our lives and for other people. And all of that just from the narrative, the storyline you're telling yourself, that you're pondering through the day. So positive narrative and the power of it, it's transformative, and there is very little effort. Did the cook still cook? Yes, but he became a leader. Did the gardener still dig? Yes, but he grew more than potatoes. He grew hope. Did the maintenance brother, fix things? Yes, but he also provided comfort and warmth and a vision. That's what a positive narrative does. It doesn't mean you stop doing what you do. It just means now you're bringing your whole self to the story. Now, where does that leave us? Do we need to go to the monastery? No, not yet. Well, you can, but not quite yet. Right now, it requires me to start changing the way I think about something. I can say, oh no, I've got to go and cook dinner again for everybody. Or I can say, I'm going to do this as a mother. And this is where thinking like a mother becomes interesting. In a positive narrative, you're nurturing, but you're also protecting, not protecting and disabling, but protecting and empowering. You're also believing in someone, in their goodness. You're believing in the goodness of yourself. And so thinking like a mother enables you to, as an individual, approach things with a big heart, an open heart. What does a mother do? In fact, what does a parent do? And you don't have to be a female to have these headspaces. You can be a man and equally be a mother. You can be a female and equally be a mother in this aspect. And so what it requires of me as an individual is to, what I'm doing, let me take it to the next level. A mother's not just going to simply make a meal. She's going to think about what she's cooking, whether the children or the partner or the husband or the grandmother or the person next door, if they're cooking for neighbors while we're in isolation, will enjoy it. Not just eat it, but enjoy it. There is that thought and consideration. She'll make sure there's nutrition in it, that nobody's health should suffer. And she will always put the need of others in perspective. When it's not done properly, we let the need of others rule over our needs. But when it's done correctly, what happens is that I'm able to consider everybody's needs, including my own, and put everything into perspective. When the kid comes screaming into the house after falling down, it's the mother who will turn it around and say, put it in perspective. It's a graze. Yes, it hurts. But look, it's only a graze. Look, you can still jump. You can still dance. You can still jerk. When a partner walks in through the door, tired or anxious or stressed, it's just the calm nature of just being present that enables the other person to relax and release and let go of their day. And so why is thinking like a mother so important? It's because it's solution-based thinking that's so natural. It's because it comes from a space of care. And not just that, but it's always seeing a bigger picture. It's opening up to more than my little world, what's going on in my little head, all the things that I have to deal with. It's when you become a parent, when you become a mother, that you think, yes, I could survive on this, or I could share with everybody. Those are the headspaces of a mother. And the more you naturally approach things in that way as a mother, the more you will find that you have energy to do much more than you think you would do. If I'm just myself and I'm not thinking of the bigger picture, what happens is if somebody comes and disturbs my sleep, I get rather grumpy. But if a child disturbs a parent, a mother's sleep, she instantly wakes up. Those are the experiences of a mother. Those are the approaches of a mother. So if you want to have a positive narrative, then think like a mother when you approach a task. It could be something as simple as putting the rubbish out once a week or once every couple of days. Do you just go and drop the rubbish, or do you notice the neighbors, the community? You're thinking bigger than yourself. So that leads into my understanding of why a positive narrative is actually stubborn optimism. It's when everybody thinks nothing's going to work that you get somebody who turns around and says, oh, but we are going to do this. We're going to do this from where, even if this doesn't work, we'll do it this way. If that doesn't work, we'll do it this way. If that doesn't work, we'll do it this way. One of the things when lockdown first began, what intrigued me was how often people referred back to the Second World War and the mentality that existed at that time. And Churchill did something very interesting. Instead of saying, oh my God, all of Europe is now owned by the Germans, and what can we do? We're a little island. If the French couldn't do it, if the other countries couldn't do it, how are we going to manage? He did the exact opposite. He came up with the phrases like dig for victory. Rosa Parks in America chose not to give up the seat on the bus and to own it and say, no, I deserve this. And so does everybody else of my race. Gandhi and his long, hard salt walk marches to the sea so that people didn't pay tax on what was naturally theirs. The suffragettes turning around and saying, you know, courage calls on courage everywhere, so that women would have a right to vote. Kennedy and his positive, not just positive, but stubborn optimism. We are going to put a man on the moon in 10 years. I mean, we'd been talking about a man on the moon for decades. Decades. It was a story you would tell the children at night. But it was Kennedy's stubborn optimism that galvanized an entire generation into believing it's possible. That's what positive optimism does. That's what stubborn optimism does. That it doesn't matter what's happening. We will find a solution. I will find this solution. And it's very interesting. It's often when things seem really awful that your positive, stubborn optimism becomes powerful. So for Nelson Mandela, let's take his example. When he was in prison, he could have just suffered like everybody else. He could have continued to fight against his oppressors, but he chose something else. His stubborn optimism was but they're like me. There's nothing to forgive. They're people like me. They're families like mine. They eat like me. And that stubborn optimism of relating to his guards in that manner was the beginning of apartheid coming down, to a point where what was really interesting was what could have been a huge amount of bloodshed actually became the most peaceful revolution in our time. And it was just positive optimism that everybody can think and feel as I do. Mother Teresa is another one. You know Mother Teresa's story? She was a nun. She was somebody within her nunnery who served, but she was excommunicated. She was actually thrown out of her nunnery, out of the church, and told, not you, not any longer. Sorry, you don't belong here. She could have been crushed, right? How do you feel when you're rejected? What's your reaction? What's the narrative that occurs when you feel rejected? I'm not valued, I'm not loved, I'm not wanted. That's just the beginning. They don't understand me. Yeah? Are those the kind of things that go through your head? She had a different narrative. Her positive narrative was, but I'm here to serve, and there's no question about it. She was thinking bigger than herself. And she started taking care of the homeless people, the people who had nothing, the people who were on the streets. And just her love for humanity, she chose love over rejection. Mandela chose forgiveness over anger. As she chose love over rejection, she was able to transform the attitude of people in India. But interestingly enough, when I was based in New York, she was visiting New York and she met the mayor at the time, and she changed policies in New York alongside the mayor. And she didn't have an appointment. She just turned up and said, I'm Mother Teresa and I'd like to meet the mayor. Now, which mayor is not going to want to meet her? She's already a leader. And she walked in and she said, I don't think your policy for homeless work. Can we have a chat? And they had a conversation, and she changed the policy towards homeless people or people with needs who were under the poverty line just by a conversation, because her heart was so big. So to have a positive narrative, we can comfortably say that we've moved from a state of powerlessness into a state of our own power. We know what we're here to do, we know what our gift is, and we use it. Mother Teresa didn't know she would start a whole chapter of nuns who served the poor. She didn't have that aim. She didn't have a grand vision to do that. Her concern was, the person I'm meeting right now, can I give them that love? Isn't it interesting? It was just one-on-one, and yet it actually started a whole movement. What I'm doing is owning what is mine and owning my power. I'm going from powerlessness, where a negative narrative is disempowering me and saying, it's not possible, I don't feel it's possible, I don't think I can do this any longer, to, but this is who I am. This is what I do. In the business world or in the personal development world, they call this passion. It's living the life you were born to lead. It's owning it. Very big word, but a very simple act. I'm meeting this person today, right now. What am I bringing to the table? What would I like to share with them? Not what do they need. If Mother Teresa had looked at the poor people and said, oh, poor you, they'd just be commiserating with each other. But she looked at them as children of God, a brother or a sister, or a unique being. And she just interacted on that basis. And she brought herself to the table. She didn't hide herself away. She chose to bring herself to the table each time she met someone, each time she did something. So, how am I going to do this? Looking inward is the answer. I need to look inward. I need to understand what makes me me. Sometimes that can be a bit scary. I know when I first started, I looked inside and said, oh, I don't like what I see. Better not to. Better to keep my attention on everything else than look at what's inside. But after you've gone over the first layer of impressions, what you're doing is actually discovering your potential, your truth on that level, your quality of love, your quality of openness, your quality of trust, your quality of forgiveness. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not asking for perfection. We're asking for the best us to step forward. And so it's looking inside, delving a little deeply and saying, what's my potential? And how can I express this? I love baking. And so since we've been home, I have been baking for the sisters that I live with. Because I live in the community, and so there's 8 of us that live in the house, and so I've been baking for everybody, whether they wanted it or not. I think I didn't actually have a discussion with them or ask their permission to bake for them. I just turned up one day and started baking scones or baking cakes, and now each week there's a question of, what are you going to bake this week? And it's such a nice way of interacting. And somebody will say to me, one of the sisters here had a birthday. Now we had a discussion and somebody said, oh, let's make a chocolate cake. I said, okay, we'll make a chocolate cake. Then after a little discussion, it became, well, actually, she loves lemons. She absolutely loves lemon. She puts lemon on everything. She will add lemon to everything she's either eating or cooking. Even on her toast. I've never seen anybody add lemon to their toast, but she does. She loves lemons. So in the end, we chose a lemon cake. But it was me turning up and saying, this is something I can do. I love doing it. I'm not very good at this and I'm not very good at that, but I don't need to discuss that. I'm just turning up and doing this with love. That's all. It means that at least a couple of times a week, we all sit together and eat something that we enjoy, that everybody takes a bite out of and makes a comment about. And it's so nice because even when it's not that great, you get a positive affirming. Only because I've been open enough to step forward and say, this is something I would like to do. Am I the best baker in the building? Under no circumstances. There are better bakers within the Brahma Kumaris, and there are probably better bakers in the house that I'm living in. But because I'm stepping up and saying, this is what I want to do. This is the method I can express my love and appreciation for the people I live with. That's what it means. And each time you do something, when you step up, what's the quality that you're going to step up with? Sometimes it can be something you want to develop. So I've been wanting to develop more patience, yeah? I live in central London. Well, I don't live there, but I spend 90% of my day in central London. I tend to just come home to sleep and do my laundry. It's a standing joke that actually Artie lives in Covent Garden. She just comes home to sleep. So what happens for me is while I'm there, I'm fully engrossed, fully part of the activities there. And the interesting thing is you never know who you're going to meet, what the conversation is going to be, where it's going to go. And that's what I really enjoy about what I do. I have no idea what's going to be sprung on me. It may be a phone call, it may be a person, it may be an email, and you suddenly think, wow, yes, I'd like to be part of that. I'd like to do that. And so then the natural enthusiasm is there. It's not something I create. It's something that I want to share because I enjoy it. It's my passion, for want of a better term. All you have to do is to own your power, is to own your situation and say, this is the situation, this is what I'd like to do, this is how I'm going to step up. And the more you do it, the more you develop it. So in Covent Garden, because everything in London moves so fast, I found my mind going a little too fast. And I had said, okay, no, we've got to stop this and be a little more patient. And so I took time out to explore what it was that I needed to do. So I'm going to come back to that, because before you can develop your qualities, there's one thing you need to do, and it's a very small thing, but it has the biggest impact on you. And it's stop comparing yourself. We know it's not a good idea to compare yourself to someone else. Yeah? They're better than me. They're not so good as me. If someone is better than me, then I start feeling less. If I am incapable, and I diminish what I have to offer. If someone is less than me, I can become arrogant, and I can stop any joy flowing in my life. That's when you compare yourself to other people. But there's one little thing that we forget to do, which is comparing ourselves against ourselves. We have to stop doing that. As we get older, as I got older, maybe not everybody else, but as I got older, I got a little less flexible physically. I'm not so sprite. And I could sit here and go, well, in the past, I was like this, and I'm not like that anymore. And all I'm doing is creating a narrative of loss within. Or if you've had an accident or you've had a sickness, and I was sick for a good few years, unfortunately. And yes, I'm getting better and there's no problems on that level, but I was pretty sick for a few years. And during that period, I actually had to spend far more time resting at home and not being able to go out and do things that I love doing. I just had to rest. There was no alternative. I could have compared, oh, now I can't do any of the things that I love that I used to love doing. What have I done? Create a narrative of sorrow. So comparing myself to anyone else, or even my old self, is the worst thing I can do. It's the start of negative, painful, sorrowful narratives that I then buy into. So what do I need to do? this is how I've been practicing it. I started small. So I've burnt dinner. I've made lunch, let's say I've cooked lunch, and I've burnt it. And the first thought is, oh, I did it so much better last time. This is awful. I started thinking this is awful. No, I've ruined dinner for everybody else. They're not going to enjoy it. Now people are going to be hungry. And the thoughts go on. And what I've done is, instead of just burnt dinner, I've burnt my entire day. I've ruined my entire day. But it was just a meal. If you stop comparing yourself to yourself, what you start doing is putting things in perspective. You start saying, yes, I burnt dinner. Is there something I can do? Yeah, I can whip up a salad, or I can make a soup. And then that's the end of the story. I can mention I've burnt dinner, I'm sorry, but I don't need to do any more than that. It doesn't need to influence who I am any longer. The more I practice over the small things like that, the more what I'm doing is creating a positive narrative, because what I'm saying is, this is it, what I'm saying is, I'm going to do as well as I can. If it's as good as yesterday, great. If I can build on that, great. But I'm satisfied being who I am and building on that from now. That only comes when you stop comparing yourself to yourself. You just say, okay, yesterday was great. Today I'm going to be great too. It's my choice. And if something goes wrong, I put it in perspective, but it doesn't define who I am. And that then leads into what happens with our memories. With a positive narrative, what you're doing, I'm just running out of time, so I'm starting to speed up, is I'm able to change the memories. I may not have had a great childhood. I may not have had good relationships. I may not have had a good a career. I may have had things go wrong. All of those things, we say life experience is what creates us, yeah? What forms us as people. The problem is that we treat our memory a bit like writing when you use a pen on paper. It's not easy to erase the ink on a piece of paper, right? And so it becomes fast and hard, and it becomes a reality. It becomes something that I cannot escape from. And then I keep living my life like that and finding that I'm fulfilling that story. I go from one bad relationship to another. I go from one bad career choice to another, whatever it is. And I think, but this is my fortune. This is how it is, because this is how it's always been. I've set it in stone. What a positive narrative is doing is actually doing something very clever. It's inviting you to treat your memories like a word processor. It's like writing something on a word processor. How easy is it to erase a word, a document? Just a few buttons, right? It's that easy. Hit the backspace, hit the delete button, finished. Most of us use the word processor as a read-only file. Yeah, you know you can't change a read-only file. You can only look at it. And so we refer back to our memories, and what we're doing is just looking at it and accepting it as the ultimate truth. What we're not doing is looking back at it and saying, but what would I like to take from this? What would I really like to take from this? I don't need to keep the whole thing. I just need to keep the gift that came from that situation. So what we're doing is editing our memory and making it a memory of joy. And this is where patience comes in for me. I'm going to tell a very quick story. I hope, Usha Ben, you don't mind. I'm going to overrun a little bit, so I'll make the meditation shorter, I promise. There's a story of Birla and Akbar. We grew up on these as bedtime stories as children, and anybody from India will tell you they're famous stories with morals in it for the children to learn from. So the story is that Akbar, the emperor, decides that he's going to have a hunting party day. He's going to go off hunting, and he's taking all his friends with him, all the people he values and his courtiers. And he's decided. So Birla turns up and he's got a cold. And Akbar says, "Oh, poor you, you've got a cold. You must feel terrible." And Birla says, "Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Let's see. Let's see what this cold does for me." Akbar just scratches his head and says, the guy's sick. He's not quite there. So he's a bit, befuddled. And so therefore he's not thinking straight. So never mind. So anyway, Birla goes with Akbar hunting. And while they're out there in the jungle in India, Birla and Akbar get separated from all the guards and all the courtiers and everybody else. Somehow they get separated. And as they go deeper into the jungle, they find that they're pretty much lost. And Akbar is still in hunting mode. So he pulls out his bow and arrow and he goes to shoot a deer. And in doing that, he cuts his finger. And he gets rather cross. And he says, "Look, I've cut my finger." And he's expecting sympathy. And Birla says, "You've just cut your finger." And he says, "But it hurts. And it's not a good thing. You can't tell me cutting my finger is a good thing to happen to me." And Birla replies, "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Let's just see how this unfolds." So anyway, as they're going along, Akbar is rather cross with Birla, as you can imagine. But they're arguing, they're bickering a bit over this, and they lose their surroundings, awareness of their surroundings, and they get caught by the jungle people, the people that live in the jungle. And they get taken to the village that these people live in, and they're going to be turned into human sacrifices. Now, there's one rule about human sacrifices, is that the person you're going to sacrifice cannot be damaged in any way. Otherwise, why would God accept their sacrifice? It then becomes a curse. So they're looking over, they can't do Birla because they can see he's got a cold. So he's not going to be sacrificed. So they think, okay, Akbar looks good, he looks strong, he's healthy, we'll sacrifice him. Then the gods will be happy with us and bestow fortune on us. And what happens is they notice then that Akbar has a cut finger. Now he can't be sacrificed either. So then they just kick both of them out and send them on their way back to the palace. And so Akbar turns around and says, Akbar says to Birla, "What happened? How did this happen?" And Birla explains, "Well, you cut your finger. So it wasn't good, it wasn't bad. It just unfolded. I have a cold. It's not good, it's not bad. It just had to unfold." And because there was patience, something good came out of it. Something good was seen and benefited. And so with a positive narrative, even if something seems adverse, even if something is challenging, even if something opposes you, with a little bit of patience, connected to your positive narrative, what you'll do is find, excuse me, find that what you will find is that even if something looks like it's going down the wrong channel, you'll bring it round. You will bring it round and you'll bring out the beauty. And in doing that, you're editing your memory, you're owning your power, your uniqueness, and you've stopped comparing yourself. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'm going to stop there. I've overrun by 5 minutes, so I apologize.